Alright, I hear ya. I wanted to talk about some other things, but because I figured all the comments would just be filled with this request anyway, sure, I'll make a little bit of a response video. I don't think we need a reaction this time. I don't need to go in depth into every single part of the video. But before we get into that, have you heard of the new Dyson vacuum? I would like to announce our first sponsor of Tailosive Tech Evers, Dyson, revolutionizing the vacuum industry with cordless design. The main reason I don't think we really need to break down into a Apple Sheep Reacts where I pause the video and explain things and then play the video is Marquez and I agree a lot on this stuff. Most of the video is him saying how Apple has developed this ecosystem where things work really, really well together. I talk about that a lot, of course, on my channel, and as Marquez often does, he just kind of states the facts. It's very, very nice how you can just sign into iCloud on your macOS devices and be able to text people, and you have AirDrop, you have continuity. If you have an iPhone, you can buy an Apple Watch. Things are fairly simple to work with. I don't want people thinking going into this that he made me upset somehow, or we have these differentiating opinions on Apple. No, we agree, I think, on the same kind of stuff. There's a couple of things I have to say, though, about the end of the video, which is where we get into kind of his metaphor. And if you don't like expanding on metaphors or similes and stuff like that, you're probably not going to enjoy this video just because I'm kind of someone who likes to expand on those, and this is one I can definitely expand on. So, Apple, for him, is often referred to as a walled garden. This is a statement that can really go either way. If you kind of hate Apple, you look at it as, yeah, see all those Apple sheep, they're stuck in a garden with all those walls they can't get out of. Or if you're an Apple sheep like me and you kind of very much enjoy this ecosystem, you're like, yeah, I enjoy hanging out in this garden. This garden's very comfortable. This garden does everything I need to. And if the walls are capable of letting the gardeners focus on the gardens that really matter and all the plant life inside of it, then I'm all for having those walls. Similarly, we looked around for a long time for new office spaces. Here at Tailosive, we did a lot of browsing to find which place would be best for us. We found this place, we moved into it, we retrofitted it. We're very comfortable with it, and I'm sure many other YouTubers have found office spaces, studios that they're very comfortable with. Not to say that there may be some other places with more benefits, whether it be cheaper rent, better views, less traffic, easier commute. But the metaphor I'll be throwing back at all of you today is being inside of a walled ecosystem or being inside of a garden that you're comfortable with is not necessarily a bad thing. Marquez kind of ended his video with this, don't get too comfortable within the Apple walled garden because you're missing out on other products, there's other ecosystems you need to try, and make sure you do that before it's too late. Like you'll be in this ecosystem and then suddenly all the devices will explode. Like there's this urgency to it. They're like, don't go too in depth, don't fall too deep into this ecosystem, or else you'll be stuck there and then there will be no way to get out. I guess I kind of disagree with that part of the video, which is that you can complain that Apple is a walled garden, that they've built up all these walls for the fact that Apple, runs iOS and the HomePod is connected to Apple Music. The issue is, I think there really isn't an ecosystem that can parallel it. In other words, to speak in terms of this metaphor, there is no other garden you can try. Outside of this walled garden, we have a vast, desolate field of different plant life that you can inspect on your own, but there's not really some other garden you can go join and admire there. I don't believe that most people are fans of Apple just because they've never tried anything else. I think that most people who are making a purchase, whether it's buying an iPhone, an iPad, a MacBook, or an Apple Watch, they're likely considering several things. Usually someone who spends that much money on something knows what they're looking for. And oftentimes, yes, they do go into it saying, I want to buy a Mac for my next computer. If someone says they're looking for a new MacBook, does that mean they've never heard of a PC before? I find that personally very hard to believe. There might be exceptions out there, sure, but Apple at least has developed a reliable enough reputation that people can just say, nah, I don't really want to try something else. I know what I'm comfortable with. I'm gonna stick with it. And that does not stay exclusively to Apple. If you're not an Apple guy, you like your PC, you're not interested in switching to macOS, I don't think you should be pressured to. I go for that a lot on my channel, but that's just because I've tried Android phones, I've tried Surface devices, I've tried PCs, and I've just found the most success with the Apple ecosystem. That's why I recommend it so much. But if you're not interested in switching, you're just fine where you are, I don't understand why we have to tell people that they don't know any better if they've ever tried something else. They don't know any better if they've never tried something else. My point is people are very, very comfortable in that Apple ecosystem because they're very certain they can not get that elsewhere? I mean, even MKBHD carries a Pixel 2 with him, or right now, probably the Galaxy S9, as well as an iPhone, and that's why you see an Apple Watch on his wrist, and not some Galaxy S Gear watch, or some Android Wear watch. In fact, most tech YouTubers, especially the ones he pointed out in his video, whether it be Austin Evans or Jonathan Morrison, they're also wearing Apple Watches. I think they are because of a reason. So the point I try to make a lot on this channel is that everyone is biased in some way, shape, or form. I think something that might distort some people's opinions is when they have both devices, because it means that you don't really have to choose one or the other. You carry two around with you. And in that case, you don't really feel like you're part of the Apple ecosystem, but you're getting all of the benefits of it. So you don't feel those pressures to switch out because you, of course, can just pick up your Android phone and it's right there. But for a lot of people, they can't afford buying two phones, or they're not necessarily interested in having two devices with them at all times. I know I'm not, which is why I don't go the route of one Pixel in one pocket, one iPhone in the other. I like traveling as light as possible, smallest wallet as possible. Sometimes I don't bring my iPhone with me because I have a cellular watch. That's just comfortable. And if there was some other garden out there that we could all switch to and try, I would be curious to compare it to Apple's walled garden. But my point is, there really isn't one. When we say that Apple's very closed off compared to other companies, consider that that basically just means they're not interested in Android. I don't think it's very far-fetched to think that maybe some consumers out there aren't very happy with the Android platform. Maybe they don't want that, and maybe that's why Apple makes iOS exclusive to their products. They don't want other companies tinkering with their operating systems. That's why they have a walled garden. They don't want other people coming in and planting their own stuff. They want to ensure that consistency and reliability, and that's what people like about Apple. You know, maybe some people aren't excited to see that the biggest change of this year's Android release is what the P is going to stand for. And now we're getting an Android P developer update, which allows you to virtually add a notch to your own display.
Here's some of the new stuff we've noticed. So one of the biggest features coming to Android P is support for a notch.
Like, if you thought the notch on the 10 was bad enough, now you can just add it to literally any Android phone. Yay! Apple, why do you close everyone out of your ecosystem? Why is that? On top of that, I think that the Apple ecosystem is not necessarily as closed off as MKBHD makes it out to be. For a long time, I had just Google Home Minis and a Google Home Max, and that complemented my iPhone and my Apple ecosystem very well. It still works. I could talk to Google without setting off my iPhone. Through the Google Home app, I had a lot of controls. And of course, I still have Google Drive and Google Photos on the App Store. So maybe a lot of people choose Apple because they can have the benefits of both. They can have that secure and optimized version of Apple's iCloud, which, by the way, you can access on PCs. And they really enjoy Apple Music, but that also is available on Android. You can play things like Spotify, and for a while at least, you could even pair Android Wear watches to your iPhone. Though since iOS 11, I've heard that's very difficult. Besides, who would want to? If you have an iPhone, you are not required to buy a HomePod if you want to get a smart speaker. That's why I don't think it's too far-fetched that people who are in the Apple ecosystem, you can buy a HomePod, but if you're not interested in building up that entire ecosystem, you can still get a home and still use an iPhone. He also brings up in his video that a lot of people will compromise on the fact that the iPhone may have inferior hardware just for the fact of the ecosystem, like the people that he pointed out in his YouTube video. They prefer the iPhone 10 because of that ecosystem. While there are some things that software-wise Apple may convince you to stay over hardware, I'd like to admit that that's not just an Apple thing, that's an any tech company thing. For instance, one of the key features people will still buy the Pixel 2 despite it lacking a lot of current flagship features is because they love that camera so much. They love that portrait mode, the fact that AI can sculpt out what to blur and what not to blur. That is all done via software. They could add that to any phone running Android, and yet you don't get that Pixel 2 portrait mode on Galaxy phones, OnePlus phones. They all have to develop it itself. Why? Because Google has some software features and that stock Android optimization that is limited to just the fluidity of that Pixel phone, because all you Pixel buyers out there say, well, it runs so much faster, the updates are better, there's no bloatware. So one could say that Google makes software exclusives to their own hardware to keep you coming back to it. There's nothing wrong with that. Google does it, Apple does it, all companies do it. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. The fact that most people who buy Apple products have more than one is showing that having an ecosystem of products, showing that building a bunch of products that work well together and making all those products products work better than anything the competition can offer does convince people. That is something we should favor, and I'm hoping that other companies like Google and Samsung try to replicate that with their own ecosystems. I don't think they've done it yet. I don't think they get anywhere close to what Apple's accomplished with all of their products working together, but they definitely should, because Apple's nearly $1 trillion company. Their fans and customers are the ones that got them there. So what Apple shows favoritism and prioritizes looks to be very important to consumers, and that's what companies should keep in mind when designing their tech. Let me know what you thought of MKBHD's video. I liked it. There's not some big disagreement here. I just thought I should make a response because everyone's asking me about it, so I might as well get it out of the way. Now we can get back into regular videos. Hope you got something insightful and interesting out of this. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.